Welcome dear students. In the previous video, we have discussed the lesson 10 of our English literature book, and that is The Unsinkable Ship. As we have learned, the ship named Titanic, which was the largest and the most luxurious ship of its era, had started its first journey on 10th April 1912. The Titanic was called the Unsinkable Ship. People were proud because they were traveling in the best ship of the world. They felt safe. But unfortunately, on the night of 14th April 1912, the ship Titanic struck against an iceberg. Due to striking, one side of the ship got scrapped. It damaged very badly. Water began to fill in the ship. The ship started to flood. And when the situation was out of control, in order to save the passengers, the Captain Smith sent radio messages for asking help. And he also ordered to lower the lifeboats in the ocean. But there were very less lifeboats in number, and the Titanic had more than 2,000 people on the ship. Here, the Titanic was sinking rapidly due to the flooding of water. Then, what happened after that? To know this, let's have the next para of the lesson. Here, the next para is, with its lights still shining, the Titanic stood upright for a few minutes. Then, at 2:20 a.m. on 15th April, she vanished into the sea. About 1,500 people drowned. Captain Smith and most of his crew went down with the ship. In this para, we are having two new words, upright and vanished. Upright means turned up straight, and vanished means disappeared. As we know, the ship had already started to tilt into the sea due to the flooding of water in it. But here you can see still the lights of the ship were shining. Because of flooding water, the ship began to tilt into the sea. Here on the screen you can observe one end of the ship began to tilt into the sea and the other end began to rise up in the air. After a minute, the lights of the Titanic went out and an unexpected thing happened. And that is breaking of the Titanic into two parts. The largest ship broke into two parts, and one part of it sank down into the ocean immediately. After that, the one end of the other part began to rise up in the air. Then it turned up straight for a few minutes, and then it started to go down into the sea. Here you can see the Titanic is sinking. And finally, at 2:20 a.m. on 15th April, it disappeared into the sea. The unsinkable ship sank into the Atlantic Ocean forever. Within 2 hours and 40 minutes after striking with an iceberg, Captain Smith and most of his crew went down with the ship into the sea. About 1,500 people were drowned or died in the icy water of Atlantic Ocean. Now let's have the next para. The Carpathia arrived at 3:40 a.m. The ship's crew found the lifeboats and saved 700 people in them. They also found chairs and pieces of wood floating on the water. But almost all of the people in the water had drowned or died of cold. The Carpathia was too late to save them. Here Carpathia arrived very late. It arrived at 3:40 a.m. about 1 hour 30 minutes after the Titanic had sunk. The Titanic already sank into the sea at 2:20. The Carpathia reached very late to help. After arriving there, the ship's crew found the lifeboats and saved all the people in them. Here you can see the survivors who were saved by the Carpathia. And about 700 people were saved. But almost all of the people who were in the water had drowned into the sea or died due to cold. The crew members also found some chairs and pieces of wood which were floating on the water. So the people who were in the lifeboats all were saved, and who were in the water almost all had died. Here it is clear that many people could be saved if the Carpathia had arrived on time. But unfortunately, it did not happen. Now, let's have the next para to know what happened after the sinking of the world's largest passenger ship, the Titanic. The next para is the sinking of the Titanic made people think harder about the safety of passengers on ships. They asked why ships carry so few lifeboats and why they turn off their radios. In 1913, it was decided that all ships must have enough room in their lifeboats to carry everyone on board. It was also decided that ships must keep their radios working every hour of the day and night. On 15th April 1912, a big tragedy happened. The Unsinkable Ship sank in the Atlantic Ocean. The news of the sinking of Titanic spread everywhere. The public was shocked to hear the news. The relatives of the passengers were panicked. They were worried about their relatives and friends. Many have lost their relatives or friends in this tragedy. The tragedy made the people think about the safety of the passengers on the ship. The people raised questions why the ship carried so few lifeboats and why the other ships turned off their radios. The sinking of Titanic brought a serious loss of lives. It made the people think harder about the safety on the ship. Then in 1913, after the disaster, the first international conference for safety of life at sea was called in London. In the conference, it was decided that all the ships must have enough space in their lifeboats to carry each person on board. And it was also decided that ships must keep their radios working all the day and night. Means they have to maintain a 24 hours radio watch. Along with this, the International Ice Patrol was established to monitor the presence of icebergs in the North Atlantic Ocean and warn the ships about it. So these rules were adopted for the safety of the passengers on the ship. Now let's have the next para to know about the wreck of the Titanic. Here the next para is In 1985, scientists sent a submarine to look for the wreck of the Titanic. They found the ship lying in two pieces on the ocean floor at a depth of around 4,000 meters or 13,000 feet. Later, they took photographs of the wreck and brought small parts of it to the surface of the water. This paragraph has two new words, submarine and wreck. Submarine. Submarine is a special ship which sails under the water. It's a special kind of watercraft that can travel under the water as well as on the surface of the water. These are used in tourism and undersea archaeology. Next is wreck. The parts of a ship that has been destroyed or has sunk at sea. So a badly damaged ship, especially in an accident that has been sunk at sea, is wreck. So in 1985, a submarine was sent into the North Atlantic Ocean by the scientists to find out the wreck of the Titanic. And it was found that the ship was lying into two pieces on the ocean floor. And it was located at the depth of around 4,000 meters. Then many photographs of the wreck were taken. Also, some small parts of the wreck were brought to the surface of the water. After examining the parts of wreck, the scientists discovered the other causes of sinking of Titanic and breaking of it into two parts. The wreck of the Titanic helped the scientists to know the main reason of this disaster. Now it's time to have the last para. The next para is, there are many stories of bravery on that terrible night in April 1912. In 1998, the director James Cameron made a famous film of the Titanic's maiden voyage. It is a very sad film. Almost everyone who sees the film leaves the cinema in tears. The sinking of the Titanic became the most famous historical tragic event, which inspired numerous stories, several films, and music also. And in 1998, the director James Cameron made a film of the Titanic's maiden voyage. He is James Cameron, the Canadian film director, producer, and editor. In 1998, he made a famous film about the sinking of the Titanic. And the name of the film is Titanic. The movie was very sad and heart-touching, full of emotions. It made the people cry. Almost everyone who watches the film is touched by it. After sinking of the Titanic, many memorials also were built in the memory of the people who died in this disaster. Like Titanic Memorial in Belfast, it is built to commemorate the lives lost in the sinking of Titanic. The another Titanic Memorial in Washington, D.C. It is built to honor the men who gave their lives so that the women and children might be saved. This is Titanic Engineers Memorial, which is built in the memory of engineers of the Titanic. And this is Titanic Musicians Memorial, which is built in the memory of the members of the Titanic Orchestra. Now, it's time to have the exercises of the lesson. Here on page number 107, in understanding the text, the exercise A is answer these questions. In this exercise, we are having 3 questions. As the answers of these questions are already completed, so let's proceed to the next slide to read the answers of these questions. Here, the first question is, why did the California not come to help the passengers on the Titanic? So the answer is, the California did not receive the Titanic's messages as the radio was turned off and radio operator was asleep. Therefore, it did not come to help the passengers on the Titanic. When the ship Titanic hit against the iceberg, the ship California was only 20 miles away from it. But it did not receive any radio message from the Titanic because its radio was turned off and the operator had gone to sleep. Therefore, it did not come to help the passengers of the Titanic. Now let's have the next question. That is, Captain Smith and his crew tried to save the passengers. Describe 3 things they did. So the answer is, they sent radio messages asking for help. They woke up all the passengers and they lowered lifeboats with people on them into the sea. After hitting against the iceberg, when the water began to fill into the ship, the captain ordered his crew to send radio messages, to wake up all the passengers and to lower the lifeboats into the sea to rescue the passengers. Now let's have the third question. That is, why did all the passengers not get into the lifeboats? So the answer is, all the passengers did not get into the lifeboats because there were not enough lifeboats to hold all the passengers. Since the lifeboats were very less in number on the Titanic, that's why a few hundred passengers could have been saved. With this exercise is completed. Now let's proceed on the next one. Here on page number 107, we are having exercise B. That is, each of these sentences has a mistake in it. Correct the mistake and write the sentences in your notebook as shown. In this exercise, we are having 6 sentences and each sentence has a mistake which we need to find out and correct. As the first sentence is already done for you, that is, the Titanic left Southampton on 11th April 1912. In this sentence, the date is incorrect. We know very well that the Titanic set out from Southampton to New York on 10th of April. So, after correcting the mistake, the sentence will be, the Titanic left Southampton on 10th April 1912. Rest sentences are to be done. So let's find out the mistakes and correct them. The next one is, the Titanic sank at 2:20 a.m. on 14th April 1912. In this sentence, the date is incorrect. Here we know the Titanic hit against the iceberg on 14th April, but it sank on 15th April. So after correcting the mistake, the sentence will be, the Titanic sank at 2:20 a.m. on 15th April 1912. After that, the next one is, the Titanic sank on its 10th voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. In this sentence, the mistake is 10th. We know very well that it was the Titanic's first voyage. So, after correcting the mistake, the sentence will be the Titanic sank on its first voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. After that, the fourth one is about 1500 passengers climbed into the Titanic's lifeboats. This sentence has a mistake, that is 15. After correcting the mistake, the sentence will be about 700 passengers climbed into the Titanic's lifeboats. Here we know that due to lack of lifeboats on the Titanic, about 700 passengers could have been saved. After that, the next one is another ship called the Carpathia arrived about 1 hour and 30 minutes after the Titanic had sunk. This sentence has a mistake of time, that is 30. So, after correcting the mistake, the sentence is another ship called the Carpathia arrived about 1 hour and 20 minutes after the Titanic had sunk. The ship Carpathia arrived very late because it was very far away from the Titanic. Now let's have the last one, that is scientists sent a submarine to look at the wreck of the Titanic in 1913. This sentence has a mistake of year. The year is incorrect. The correct year is 1985. So the sentence will be scientists sent a submarine to look at the wreck of the Titanic in 1985. Here this exercise is completed. Now it's time to give the end to this video. The rest exercises of the lesson will be taken in the next video. Till then, keep learning. Thank you.